Keep bread in the freezer for longer storage. 40% of food in the U.S. goes uneaten. Save money, save food, save the planet. Visit Seattle Public Utilities for more tips.
On Rainier Avenue Radio.world, look for the Change Your Food, Change Your Life show. I'm Dennis Weaver, your good food guide and host, helping you to feel good and look good, and who wouldn't want some of that? All that and more from the Change Your Food, Change Your Life show on Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Stories, songs, and get. Begin living the organic good food life, and the rest of your life just may be the best of your life. Always up, baby, to your health.
Greetings. This is your host, DJ Neftali, Rainier Avenue Radio.world, the best DJ in the Seattle area. You can catch me every Monday at 8 p.m. on YouTube. Like I said, this is DJ Neftali, the best reggae in Seattle, Washington, the best radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Come on, right?
Generational wealth. Generational wealth. Generational wealth. What is generational wealth? We asked our communities, and this is what they had to say.
Generational wealth to me is setting up a safety net for the future, not only for yourself, but for the generations to come. To not have the future generations, maybe in your own family, to have to go through the same trials that you had to go through. Maybe if you went through something hard when you were younger, maybe being poor, being middle class, or not having the money to have access to the things that other people around you do. It's setting up that safety net so that not only you, maybe later in your life, but also your kids, their kids, can end up having the luxuries that you would have wanted when you were young.
This campaign to create awareness to generational wealth is brought to you by the Department of Neighborhood's Generational Wealth Initiative, the Washington Housing Finance Commission, and Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Create your generational wealth for you and the future of your families.
You are listening to Rainier Avenue Radio,
your community radio station.
League is dealing with protests in baseball, and I just found out about it. I said, you really can't do what you're doing.
Welcome to Rainier Avenue Radio and WIAA Primetime, and today we are with Cindy Adsit, who is a real treat from the Washington Interscholastic Activities Association. Cindy was with us last year, and the conversation was so enjoyable. She has a little bit of history with everything here in the WIAA and working with youth all over the state of Washington, but certainly familiar with Rainier Avenue and right here at the Columbia City Theater. Welcome here for another Tuesday adventure into interscholastic activities with our youth all throughout the state of Washington. Cindy, welcome back.
Thanks. It's a pleasure being here.
We are so excited to have you here and so excited to be a part of Rainier Avenue Radio. And we have a variety of different spring functions lined up, which we're excited about, which obviously includes athletics and other things. If you love talk radio, world music, if you love political conversation, it is an election year, and I'm sure that you will be tuning in. But today we are going to go ahead and talk about high school sports with a longtime assistant athletic director or executive assistant or whatever they call. What are your titles now down there?
Assistant executive director.
Existent executive director. I'll get all of that down to you guys. I'm surprised you don't have a little moniker for that, a little acronym. But tell us about what you do in your role. And we have you as director of compliance. But with your historical knowledge, you do way more than that.
Yeah, during that time, this is actually my 38th year with the association, and during the time that I've been there, I've had primary responsibility for every sport and activity except football and wrestling, although I am second in wrestling, have been now for a couple of years. But with that, currently I oversee volleyball, cheerleading, gymnastics, dance drill, and baseball, and primary responsibilities include making recommendations to the WIAA Executive Board on the state tournament site, the manager setting the budget, getting all the workers lined up, getting everything, ordering the awards, getting officials, all the things that go into putting on a major state event. But the compliance piece has to do with the WIAA handbook and helping the member schools understand the rules that they have adopted and what it means to be in compliance with those rules.
Cindy, before we get into the foundation of all of the rules and the foundation of putting a tournament on, let's talk about you. You said 38 years. Tell us what keeps a person connected to high school athletics in a state association for 38 years?
Well, for one, I'm going to tell you, it doesn't feel like it's been that long. I will say that I got involved because, this is one of the things that we've talked about over time is the shortage of officials. I actually got the job with the association initially because of my involvement with the Officials Association. And from that, I started working state tournaments and got involved and was working for the Seattle Park Department at that time before I went to work for the WIAA. And I got that job because I knew how to officiate basketball. And I started out there officiating 9 games on a Saturday to eventually running just down the street from here, Rainier Community Center. So the thing about this job, and I said this, which since the pandemic, even this is thrown out the window, is that the only thing that's predictable is the beginning and ending of the seasons. And when the pandemic hit, that all went to heck too. So that's not even predictable. There's something new every day. Every day. I continue to learn something new. There's unique situations in the schools. There's a lot of changes that they're dealing with, and we're just trying to help them navigate that with their sports and activities programs. So it's continually invigorating, and it's very inspiring to work with people who devote themselves to providing opportunities for others. That's very, it touches my heart, honestly, and I am so pleased to be part of that.
4 years ago, we had the pandemic. That obviously changed so much of our society, so much of not only here in Washington State and the country, throughout the world, we changed. But one of the things that I think we all recognize was the value of competitions between communities and giving these young people who had been, a lot of cases, waiting all their lives. A lot of times it was the first time they ever played sports, but to work with their groups and to have that removed was a major thing we learned. And it really did impact our kids on a variety of different levels, and it impacted the mental health of our children. Tell us about the importance of sports and what it brings to, and the things that you've seen over the last 38 years.
Well, I will tell you that's one of the things that happened because that's one of the things that we have always tried to educate people on the value of these programs, of teaching. It's really all about developing better citizens, teaching them how to manage their time, how to get along with people, how to work with people they don't like necessarily, how to accept the good and the bad in every situation. And like you said, during the pandemic, when it wasn't offered, I think people really realized then the value of it. When it wasn't there, all of a sudden it was a big deal. And we talked about it at that time. I said, when things resume, I hope people remember the feeling that they have right now. But what's happened as a result, I think a lot of them do realize the value of it, but there's a lot of negativity that has come back when these programs, sportsmanship is very bad. The aggressive behavior and foul language that's displayed towards opponents and officials is just, it's very disturbing how that has escalated since we've come back after the pandemic. And I'm not sure how much of that is because students and parents lost time with other people when they were stuck at home and forgot, how to take care of each other. I don't know. I'm waiting for the pendulum to start swinging the other way because it's pretty disturbing. And that's because I see all the ejection reports that we get when they come in.
I don't know, but as many that listen on Rainier Avenue Radio, I claim to know. I think one of the things is that we've had to deal with getting away from social media. I mean, to Facebook and Twitter and all those groups. Not that I'm any better than anybody else, because I'm constantly on there. But the bottom line issue is that I really think that we've kind of created a society where you can sort of almost be a little bit antisocial now. You can get caught up in your phone, you can get caught up in your Netflix, and you can tend to forget that human relationships are important. And then I think people started to see through coming back, especially through athletics, where you have to work and learn with coaches and players, like you said, with some people you don't really get along with, but you had to temper yourself. I think people had to come back and learn from that.
Mm-hmm. It's like learning all over again. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And what do you think are some of the things that the WIAA has been able to do to build those types of relationships?
Well, we try to work.
I should say, create those types of experiences.
You know, ours is really, from the WI standpoint, it's kind of a top down. We try to make the state experience of really something that these kids and their families and their communities will remember, will value their entire lives. In fact, I describe my job as I'm making memories. That's what my job is, not running events, it's making memories. So they realize that there are very few teams that make it to that peak, that they have. Hopefully they will learn all these values that we talked about along the way and still feel like it's been a great experience, even if they don't make it to the state tournament.
Let's talk about tournaments. And let's talk about the tournaments that the WIAA puts on. How many sports, let me actually put this, how many tournaments does the WIAA host every year?
So I'll answer both of those, because there's 14 sports, music, drama, debate, cheerleading, dance, drill, and 120 state events every year.
Wow.
With a staff of 11.
So it's a little bit more than 10, 12 a person. Can you provide an overview of the process involved in developing and coordinating state tournaments for high school athletics in Washington State?
Well, I will say, with a staff of 11, we count on a huge core of volunteers to help run these events. Some more than others. State track, for instance, there's about 200 volunteers each day at each one of the 2 sites we use. But in determining where these events will be held, first we have to look to see well, we have developed criteria for each event, what it takes, the size of the court or field, and how many spectators we anticipate. So we have to determine then if a facility is appropriate. So if the court or field meets the specifications, if they have adequate parking, seating, restrooms, concessions, medical support, locker rooms, team meeting rooms, police support if needed, location of the closest hospital, and ticket booths. So all of those things, once we get all those to say, okay, this site is appropriate, then is it available? Is there a lot of great sites around this state that are not available because they have other user groups in them? So then is it affordable? So we have to look to see, based on what we know have as our operating budget, if it's within our budget to make that work. And then there has to be somebody at that site that's willing to serve as the tournament manager and really help to coordinate all those things, pull all the staff together, and run an event. It's a tremendous amount of work, even for some of the smaller events, to put on a state tournament. And then it expands from there for the real big ones in the major facilities.
With the tournaments and the number of staff, and of course with the group of volunteers, there's got to be a committee that's put together to organize and kind of coordinate things. How do the committees come together to organize these responsibilities and timelines?
Well, I don't know that there really is a committee for putting these events together. There's each one of us that oversees a sport has an advisory group of coaches and administrators that with that sport that kind of are the fielders out in the field. They might say, hey, here's some place to look at. So I guess that we have advisory groups that provide us with all kinds of information and then set timelines. It's the WI Executive Board that eventually makes the decision once we put together all of the information on that site. And we have gone to a bid process the last 3 years. So we send out the request for proposals to everyone, every college, every community college, every major site, every sports commission, city council, everybody, every school. And then if they think they can meet it, they want to do it, they submit a bid, and then we review those. And sometimes we have to go banging on the door to say, it's not like there's a whole lineup of people that are just waiting to put these events on.
Well, you and I, before we came on, we were talking about Taylor Swift and the impact of what she does economically to a community, or the Mariners just starting back up, and people come from different points of the region to come watch Major League Baseball or soccer here in our community. We've got women's basketball, and people will come in the summertime, and they talk about the economic impact that has on an area. And obviously that's why people pay to attract stars to come see, because it's, from a business and economic standpoint, people will come. The same thing with the tournaments. And, we're not going to compare a WIAA tournament to a Major League Baseball game or a homestand, I guess. But the bottom line issue is that if you're in a smaller community, this can raise the profile of your community and also bring in a few people who are going to rent some hotel rooms and eat at restaurants.
Absolutely true. Yeah. And I will tell you, one of the communities in the state that has really embraced our events and understands the value is Yakima, the Yakima Valley. With the, I will tell you, we have state volleyball, state dance drill, state basketball there. We do not have to pay for that facility. That is paid by the Yakima Sports Commission. They know if they invest in this tournament, it'll bring all these people. They will more than get their money back. But the other communities have not picked up on that quite to that extent. That's the only one right now that has made that offer for the events that they have bid on.
What makes Yakima a little different? Is it because they have the venues? Is it because they have an interested community there? What makes them just a little bit more aggressive in this type of situation?
Because they don't have like Seattle or Tacoma or even Spokane, they don't attract in some of the other bigger events. They don't have major theater. They don't have major sports. So WIAA is their Super Bowl of events.
And that must make it for an engaged community as well to get really excited around it and come out and support the athletes.
Yeah, and just like every time you drive by a motel, there's a welcome to Yakima for state. Their signs are everywhere in the community.
What steps are taken to ensure that these tournaments run smoothly? And obviously, I mean, when you have 11 people overseeing that many tournaments, 120 tournaments, are there some fundamentals in place to make sure that all of this stays in lock and step with what it's supposed to accomplish?
Well, there's a lot of planning that goes into it. And I will tell you, after state basketball, I had a couple of people come up to me and said, "Oh, you must be so glad it's over." I'm going to tell you, it's never over. Because as soon as you're already planning for the next year as you're going through the current year. So it's getting good people involved, a lot of good volunteers who are really committed to it. And the best part for me for a lot of these state events is the people that work these events come back year after year after year after year. And it's better than a family reunion because the people are there because they want to be there. Where family reunions, sometimes you go because you feel obligated to go. It's not like that at these state events. So there's a lot of people who are really dedicated to providing a quality experience for the kids, and they perpetuate that year after year. And we're always looking to improve them. We tried a number of enhancements this year that really made a difference. For instance, this year at State Gymnastics was the first year that we brought in a special lighting system that we were able to dim the lights, and we had a kaleidoscope of lights and glow-in-the-dark apparel. They've never had that before. It's at Sammamish High School until that school has a lot of windows, so you can't make it dark during the day. But we came up with a new thing, and they loved it.
And those blend to the experience not only for the participants but also for the spectators.
Yeah.
And it just seems to me that one of the things is that when you go to a Seahawks game and you go to a Husky game or a Mariners game or whoever the pro sport is, it's almost like this big production. And it just, I mean, it sounds like at least you're trying to pay attention to the production aspect, because that's what attracts a lot of fans.
Well, we want to make sure it's a good experience for those fans that do choose to come, and that it gives them makes some memories that they are pleased to have in their lives and look back on.
You've been around sports for a long time. And I played sports a long time ago, and let me figure out how I can phrase this question for you, because it's not a role of the tournament administrator to get kids or to get a team to the tournament. They need to work on that on their own and get coach and really put the effort into doing that. But at the same time, it seems like there are certain schools and certain communities around the state that may or may not have that opportunity, they're in a league, or they're in a level of competition that doesn't allow them to attract the top students and so forth. And we hear this from time to time. Oh, it's not fair for this group or that group. And I'm just wondering, from your perspective, is there a way that we can make it a more equitable opportunity for certain communities to see a state championship or to participate in a state tournament every once in a while?
Well, I think you're right. The talent pool ebbs and flows. It comes down a lot of times to the coach and the expectations and the what kind of atmosphere is created in that community based on that coach and just what the community expects of their programs. You're right. There are some schools that seem to qualify almost every year in some events. And some of the schools that don't qualify will tell you that a lot of it has to do with maybe it's their location. They don't have the ability for as many non-school sporting activities or possibilities that some of the other communities do. It may be a lack of engagement in their own community. It may be fewer participants that turn out. It just really varies. But the way that teams qualify, the tournament structure is based on the number of teams that offer that sport in that classification statewide. And they're portioned out based on how many schools in each area offer that sport. So,
is it still special to be a state champion?
I believe it would be if you asked any one of them. You just go back and ask Garfield girls, did winning number 4 mean as much as number 1? And I think they would tell you, yes, it did. It's some of the kids are different, but the experience each time means a lot.
Well, for all those that are listening on Rainier Avenue Radio, or will see this video tape or the delayed broadcast, or the see this on YouTube or many of our other channels, your participation in sports makes you a champion. Don't ever forget that. And the ability to manage your time, the ability to develop relationships, the ability to command respect from coaches and adults. It's so important for our students throughout the state of Washington. I can't underscore or overstate the importance of the WIAA and what they do to make sure that our kids who desperately need this right now have an avenue to participate in so many different opportunities. And we appreciate Cindy being here with us today on your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.world. We are looking forward to a very, very exciting spring. Heck, we're really looking forward to a very, very exciting 2024. And that, of course, makes it a political year. And Tony B loves him some politics. And Daniel Bellis loves some politics. Daniel Bellis will have some fresh juice, too. I'm sure he'll promote himself up here in a second. But the bottom line issue is that Rainier Avenue Radio is going to be covering these things from our community's perspective, giving you an opportunity to participate. I'm sure we will talk about voting in our community. I'm sure we'll talk about all of the different candidates that will come through. Probably do a couple of voters forums here in 2024. And then, of course, we will follow this up right until Election Day, and we'll probably do an Election Day special as we've done in the past. Although my wife doesn't like me to get on Rainier Avenue Radio and talk sports, we still feel it's an important community service, especially actually when I ran for the city council in the nomination process last January. So 2024 is going to be a political year, and we know many of you love it. And we will definitely be providing that for you on your community radio station. Stay tuned throughout the summer, and I'm sure we're going to have a good time with this. The participants in athletics, Cindy, they need to have someone come in and be an arbiter of the games. They come in, arbitrate this. We need to have officials and referees to make sure, number one, not only that is a fair contest, but that it is a good contest based on the rules that are applied in all the different disciplines. Tell us about how the tournaments select officials and referees for these opportunities.
Well, it's done in much the same manner that the schools are selected or qualify. They said we look at the total number of schools statewide based on the format. Those positions are allocated out to the different WIAA districts. In a similar manner, they are allocated out to the officials associations based on how many officials they have, based on what classifications they have been working, and those associations nominate individuals. Let's say we may have 24 positions for a state basketball tournament, and those come from all around the state. Each one of the associations submits the names for their top officials, and that's how they get there. And
tell us about is this recognized as an honor for the officials that get selected? And do they vigorously try to compete and lobby for this, or do they just do a great job and those are the ones that end up being selected?
Probably a little bit of both. Depends on the size of the association, depends on where they're coming from. I can tell you, after meeting with officials every time the night before the tournament starts, it is a tremendous honor for them to be there, and they are just as thrilled as the teams themselves that they get to be there and be part of it. I will tell you, I was in Spokane for 1B, 2B basketball. It's the small schools, and I was sitting next to one of the officials. They sit right at the curtain, which is dividing the two courts, and he's taking pictures. And I said, what are you taking pictures of? He said, I have never worked a game that means this much to me in this kind of an environment. I want to remember this forever. So he was taking pictures of the Spokane Arena, which is really a phenomenal facility to be in. But that just goes to show you, that's one example of how much it means to them to be part of it.
One last question before we go to break is, and I know this from being a private school, attending a private school, but of course a long time ago, but also coaching at a public school, making sure that the kids are have the transportation to get there. And so if you're at a Seattle school and your tournament is in Eastern Washington, how do we ensure that the kids have the opportunity to get there? How is that all coordinated? Does that the districts work on that to make sure that the cross country team or the basketball team can get there, and if they need to stay overnight, those accommodations are made?
Those are handled by each one of the qualified schools themselves directly. Yeah.
And do they find their own deals, or does the WIAA set up any types of arrangements with hotels or restaurants or different things that you need when you're on the road during those types of periods?
That's when we work with the community to say, this is what's coming. You might want to extend your hours of operation during this tournament because some of these games run late. We don't really negotiate. We've tried to negotiate rates for motels. One of the things we found is helping schools with that is they want to be able to make their own arrangements and not have to be told where they're staying, even if it might be the best rate. So they like to make the arrangements on their own, but we work with the communities to cater to them as much as possible.
She is Cindy Adsit. She has been with the Washington Interscholastic Activities Association for 38 years, if you can believe that. And someone who's I think it's safe to say that Ms. Adsit has spent her life working on behalf of our community. So we're going to come back and spend more time with her on your community radio station on return, Rainier Avenue Radio World, WIAA Primetime.
This is Paul Pearson, host of Star Time. And when I'm not using my GPS to navigate the land of 1,000 dances, I'm listening to Rainier Avenue Radio .world.
Generational wealth. Generational wealth. Generational wealth. What is generational wealth? We asked our communities, and this is what they had to
How does
say.
generational wealth play into my family, my family's history, my children? What am I doing for my children to perhaps build them more wealth? I think it goes both ways, because for many immigrant families who are laboring constantly to live, your children are raised a certain way. Your children adopt certain values, which then will become their life and how they live it. When I see folks that perhaps have copious generational wealth, I see a whole different mindset, different ways of treating people. And I see it in my own children too. I feel like a lot of those values, in a lot of ways, begin to get lost when you don't have to work so hard to
This
live.
campaign to create awareness to generational wealth is brought to you by the Department of Neighborhood's Generational Wealth Initiative, the Washington Housing Finance Commission, and Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
Hello, listener. What's important to you about what's going on in your community? Are you interested? Are you concerned? In any case, I invite you to tune into my show, Seattle Here and Now, on Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Why? I will be covering a wide range of topics important to you and impacting the community. Each show will have a special guest or guests to share with you information on a variety of subjects that are happening here and now in Seattle. I promise I will work hard to make my show informative, interesting, and entertaining. Be sure to listen to Seattle Here and Now on Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
What's going on, world? It's your boy OG Mambo.
And your guy D Money. Join us along with Pint Size Patron and ID Yourself
Here on Fresh Juice at Rainier Avenue Radio.
every Wednesday hump day from 9 to 11 Pacific.
Get exclusive interviews from your favorite artists, all the hottest music, and updates on what we got going on in the world.
That's every Wednesday, 9 to 11 p.m. on Seattle's Rainier Avenue Radio.
You probably have questions about COVID vaccines. Here are some answers about how they're being made.
How are COVID vaccines being produced faster?
Usually, vaccine testing and production are separate steps. But because of the pandemic, vaccines are being developed on parallel tracks. So both steps are happening just at the same time.
How are the vaccines being tested?
Right now, several different COVID vaccines are in testing. Each go through multiple clinical trials with up to thousands of volunteers.
How do vaccines get approved?
Not all COVID vaccine versions will make it to the final stages of testing and approval. Produced vaccines that do not pass clinical trials will be destroyed. But for those that do pass, a team of medical experts will examine test results and possible side effects. If the vaccine is effective and safe, it gets approved and gets to you. Go to covidvaccinewa.org to learn more. A message from the state of Washington.
You know you can't get enough of Rainier Avenue Radio.
It's just such a difficult format. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And yes, we are talking about Rainier Avenue Radio, and we are talking about the fact that it is 2024. It is an election year, and we were talking about just how crazy things will be this summer. And I'm sure that you will see the conventions, although I don't think the networks cancel everything for the conventions. I remember growing up when the convention season happened, there was like 2 weeks of television that you didn't get to see. You had to watch Channel 11. And obviously, I grew up. I know it's going to be difficult for a lot of you younger people to understand. I grew up without cable TV, and we only had 3 channels. And when those were bogged up by the conventions, we would have to go to Channel 11, which is out of Tacoma. We had to point the aerial to the south and see if we can get it clearly, and then we can maybe catch a couple of movies in the afternoon. So it was a little bit different than clicking through 140 channels that you all have now. Of course, if that is if my son has woken up from being on spring vacation. Juan, Cotto, touching bases with you on your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.world, and we are just talking about the issues that go on in our community, and that's what we do here at Rainier Avenue Radio. And if you love world music, if you love politics, if you love sports, you're at the right place. We think it's a lot of fun, and I'm sure some of you will see this on YouTube. I'm sure some of you will see this on some sort of social media play. And if you do, remember, we are here 24 hours, 7 days a week. We have a variety of different formats and interesting guests on your community radio station. You can donate. I know that Tony would love to have me talk about that. You can donate to support community public radio by clicking on that Venmo button, I believe. And that'll allow you to get the programming that you enjoy. It allows us to bring in interesting guests like Cindy Adsit from the Washington Interscholastic Activities Association, who spends time with us maybe once a year. I'm going to talk to Mick and see if we can get her out here more often. But nevertheless, it's great to have you.
It's always fun being here.
Did you play high school athletics? Refresh my memory.
Yes. I had the option to play one sport because I had to work. I was raised by a single parent grandmother. She said, you get one season. So I played basketball in high school. Actually, I squeezed in 1 year of track too, but I don't know that even really counts. But I played basketball in high school, and I grew up in southeastern Montana, small town Montana. And then I played volleyball and basketball at Montana State.
When you see girls' athletics now, and I'm amazed. Obviously, we have called the state championship games the last several years here on Rainier Avenue Radio. We've called the Metro Championship games. Are you amazed like I am? And I don't want to use this as a gender comparison, but the game has gotten so much faster, and the speed of the game has gotten so much faster. I think it's difficult to ref, and with the speed, the skill level is absolutely amazing.
And the players are so much taller. When I was playing, there were no girls that were that tall. So, yeah, it is a totally different game. And I will say that the girls and women's game progressed at a much more, a faster rate than the boys and men who've been playing for a long, many more years. But the girls and women have certainly caught up to them. Aren't they saying now that the NC2A, the women are attracting bigger crowds than the men are right now?
Not only that, if you saw last night's performance, this young lady by the name of Caitlin Clark, who certainly has become a more than a superstar in our sports pantheon, and she put on a show last night. I think she scored over 40 points yet again to defeat the defending national champion, Louisiana State University. And I can't remember what the score was last night. But Cindy, the Big Three League, and I cannot remember, this is where I'm having my senior moments, can't remember the entertainer that's involved with that, but they have just offered Caitlin Clark $5 million to come and play in this league, which is a men's league of former players, and they play 3-on-3 games. But they want Caitlin Clark with her incredible ability to come, and it seems not only now are the crowds getting bigger, but the purses are getting bigger for some of the women. And I know that the NIL deals, some of the female participants were getting high six, and in Miss Clark's case, probably around $7 million. Seven-figure endorsement deals. That's something that's definitely changing in women's sports as well.
Definitely that. Well, that's a recent development that has really changed the whole scope of collegiate athletics. But yeah,
is it good that we're seeing the athletes starting to get some of this money that they're generating?
I don't really know how to answer that, because it's like I'm not sure that that's a good thing for the sport, although it's great for those individuals. Let's put it that way.
I think one of the young men, Travis Hunter, who's a football player in Colorado, and he said to Deion Sanders, I'm broke. I don't have any money. And he said, keep telling your relatives that.
Well, I was told when they changed the Olympics to allow professional athletes to compete there. So that's how far back I go. That's a little bit where I'm coming from on that.
It was meant to be for games and kids and young people who were doing this. And you're absolutely right. I think the professional thing certainly has limited some access, but it's also raised a certain amount of access as well. So you get those trade-offs. But I'm with you. I thought it was more interesting to see the amateur athletes go out there and represent their country.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, when the NIL, when that all came about, my son, who's half my age, and I had some very spirited debates on whether it was a good thing or not.
What side did your son take?
Oh, he's all for it. He thinks that the athletes have long been taken advantage of, the collegiate ones.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And looking at some of the TV contracts and the money that goes to the NCAA, I can certainly see that argument.
Yep.
But it's an interesting one. Of course, as Mick and I have talked here on many times, there is a big difference between high school athletics. Although now some of these NIL deals, when you're in your senior year, what I believe the young man who is a quarterback at the University of Texas, Arch Manning, he was one of the highest paid athletes in the country.
Wow.
And they were talking about he's making more money, and having the MANNING name has a lot to do with that. But certainly it is something that is completely foreign to say not even 10, 15, 20 years ago.
Exactly. Yeah.
And we haven't seen it. Well, I know we've had some really good athletes come out of Washington State recently. It'll be interesting to see which athletes will be receiving NIL dollars. And is that something you guys have looked at? Have you been privy to those conversations in terms of high school athletes?
Our rules, the WIAA rules, have really allowed for it for a long time. As long as the student is not representing their school, they have always been allowed to accept money. And this goes back to back when the high school quarterback used to wear a tuxedo and advertise for the local company for homecoming. So it goes back a long way. That it's always been allowed here. So schools are not required to report to us. I will say a couple years ago, when it was really gaining focus, there were at least 3 athletes that I'm aware of in different places around the state that had been offered some considerable money from local businesses. But other than that, it's only speculation on my part.
It's only speculation, and it just proves once again, sports is definitely a marketing play. I mean, you attract an audience, and then you get their attention, and hopefully somebody can, we'll always try to come up with a creative way to get them to purchase a product, and we've seen that, and it's certainly, I've talked with Pat McCarthy and Tara Davis on the Seattle Public Schools. It just seems like in the Metro League, they have professionals playing every night. I mean, there was a time where you can go see a Tari Eason, you could go see a Marjan Beauchamp, you could go see a Paulo Banchero, 3 kids that get drafted in the first round, and it was so cool that you could pay $6 to see that type of talent.
Yeah.
And I was in Washington, D.C. recently, and Paulo came and played for the Orlando Magic and the Washington Wizards, and he was there, and he had given his tickets away, so his dad couldn't. His dad said that unfortunately, Juan, you have to go get a ticket, and and I spent about $50 to get in the building, but I was thinking to myself, geez, it was only $6 a few years ago to watch him play. So that's fun. Tell us about the contingency plans that are in place for high school athletics and tournaments. If something happens unforeseen, if we have a weather issue, what happens to the tournament, and how do we reschedule, or how do we recreate it?
Well, there's where the WI staff are working with the tournament manager on site to determine if we can continue, how much of a delay there will be. And like you said, there's a lot of things, all from power outages to the earthquake that happened at the Tacoma. To inclement weather in the spring is something that's pretty common to determine if it looks like it's going to let up. Will we be able to resume today? If not today, what's the next day that the facility is available? So we always have an inclement weather plans to determine if the facility is available and how long the teams might need to stay. And if it creates an additional overnight stay beyond the end of the tournament, we will typically bring back only those teams that are still in contention for the championship, and everybody else will get a trophy for the highest they could have earned had they stayed. And we haven't faced severe weather like that for quite a while, but I can remember a time when we had to give out 12 third-place trophies in softball because it was rained out, and it was going to continue to rain for the next 2 weeks.
There is also a divide in the state of Washington, and the Cascade Mountain Range creates this natural north to south divide. You have Eastern Washington and Western Washington. What do we do, and what does the WIAA do? How do we ensure that, and you have towns like Yakima that want the tournaments, so how do we make sure that we have the latter parts of those tournaments? For example, for the football tournament, the kids are having an opportunity to play some of the games in Eastern Washington, and making sure that it's kind of equitable. I hear sometimes some of my good friends from Eastern Washington say, they don't want to come over here and play us over here, and I guess if they had to, they would. But it seems like there at times can be a feeling that a lot of the games are played over in the western side of the state. How do you guys determine that?
Well, part of that, they do get to play the earlier rounds in Eastern Washington. I want to make sure it's about that. It could be be up as late as the semifinals in football, depending on who's still in it at that point. The board, every 2 years, which is based on we have a 2-year allocation cycle, they review the number of the schools, numbers and percentages of schools on the west side by classification, the number of tournaments on the west side, the number of schools on the east side, and the number of tournaments on the east side. And ideally, it would be 50-50, but it just doesn't really come down to that because, as we mentioned earlier, it really comes down to what facilities are appropriate, available, affordable, and those communities are willing to host them.
When you look back at recent tournaments, or when you look back at your career since you started taking over this specific part of the enterprise, can you look back and say, geez, that was a really good year, or geez, look back and share some times where that was a really good tournament and everything came together, the community and the people and the experience was really good, things that you're really proud of?
Well, I'm going to say this year, the 1A, 2A state basketball tournament in Yakima was phenomenal because they had a lot of local teams that qualified. The teams right in the Yakima Valley qualified. And while this is a problem, it's a good problem, it's still a problem, they had to suspend ticket sales for a little while until they could get some people to move in and out. Eventually, everybody got in. So I would say that was phenomenal. Talking to the people that were there, it was electric. It was just a great, great, great experience for everybody that was in that facility at that time. I think the first state tournaments that we had after COVID were pretty phenomenal too. This first time back, everybody was excited. Our attendance was way up. Some of it's tapered off a little bit since then, and that kind of ebbs and flows too. Depends on the weather, depends on who's in, depends on how many times they've been in. A lot of different factors that go into trying to anticipate tournament attendance, but we'll do it. We'll keep it.
So that the conversations are back in play with the University of Washington. The football, I know this is Andy's area, but the football tournament, the state tournament, which seemed to be very, very popular this year, was back at Husky Stadium, and it looks like we're going to be for the next couple of years.
Yep. They have verbally committed for the next 2 years there. And it was pretty special to just see the look on the face of those football players when they walked in and walked out on that field, and just the sense of awe that they had of being there. So it was so great that was able to all come together. And at least for the next 2 years, it looks like it's going to too. So hopefully that will continue.
So different than it looks like on television when you're actually there. And so much bigger. It's a much bigger space.
Yeah.
I remember this year it was very, very special to be at the Arizona State game. Sorry, all you Jason Brown O'Day fans. But a young man by the name of Mish Powell intercepted the pass, and he ran down the left sideline for a touchdown to put the University of Washington in the lead for a victory they would have over a much, much tougher Arizona State team than we thought it was going to be. And I had an opportunity to talk to Mish Powell up at Bloodworks Northwest where I work, and he came in and promoted blood donation for us. Did some really cool things. But I said, do you remember that night and that play? And he said, Mr. Cotto, it was so loud. He goes, I couldn't believe it. He said, it was so loud all the way to the end zone. He just kind of, but he just was remarking about how the sound just kind of and to be such a cool place. And I'm so glad that the young people, our young football players, have an opportunity to play there and play that game at the state championship games at Husky Stadium. And we hope that will continue. Looking ahead, any improvements? You say that it never ends. People say, geez, aren't you glad it's over? You say it never ends. Any innovations that we can look forward to? Any more flashing lights? Any more things that we think that the public are going to look forward to in tournaments, maybe here in the spring and into the future?
The flashing lights are probably not going to happen at these outdoor events, but which is what we have this spring. But we're always looking for ways to make them special. If it's a special introduction ceremony or national anthem or color guard or something that's a little bit out of the ordinary for those kids, we'll keep working at it.
So awesome. We had a conversation yesterday. We were exchanging and we were discussing rules. You also oversee the rules and explain that to me. Is that of the WIAA or is that of the? Explain to me how the rules are set up and how you monitor those rules.
The rules of the association, those that are in the WI handbook, have all been adopted by the member schools themselves. Any school can propose a change in a rule, and if they get 4 other schools to sign off, then they submit what's called an amendment. So they can submit an amendment to the WI handbook, and it goes through extensive review. They have to get that in October. The voting period is coming up here at the end of April. So from October till April, there's a lot of discussion in the schools, the leagues, the WI districts about what a proposed rule change might mean for them. And then their representative assembly, which are the elected officials, the officials elected by the schools themselves to vote on their behalf. If a rule gets a 60% majority vote, then it goes into effect the following year. So all the rules in there in the handbook have been adopted by the memberships. And our role, my role, the role of all of our staff is to just help them understand what they passed and how it's to be implemented and how it's interpreted.
What types of rules come up? Can you give us an example?
It seems like the rules of eligibility every year, there's always some proposed changes in that, whether they should be some changes to the transfer rules or what students should be eligible or how they can be made eligible. We have a special committee that is actually meeting now to look at our transfer rules to see how we might make that or what can be done to make that rule a little more palatable for schools, because that's a hard one to monitor. But the schools are doing a terrific job with it. There's other rules on how many games they get to play, how many practices they have to have. Let's see, we had 28 proposed changes this year, which is a lot. I'm trying to remember what some of those other ones are. But a lot of discussion, and again, a lot of the general public doesn't understand that it's not Cindy making the rules. No. I don't even get to vote.
Who gets to establish a rule? Let's say if I want Cotto, community parent, community advocate, would I go to the school in my community and say to the athletic director, here's a potential rule, would you like to submit this? How does that process work?
Yeah, that would work. You would work through the athletic director at your school, and then that athletic director would get 4 other schools to sign off and hopefully get it in. So I'll tell you, even for those that don't pass, there's always a lot of really good discussion that comes out of it. People take it very seriously to talk about how we can improve upon the programs that are being offered in the schools.
What do you think are outside of the discussions around the eligibility? Are there any other ones that seem to be controversial, or are they pretty much straightforward dealing with the sport itself?
There are quite a few of them that are in there this year dealing with safety of training of coaches. One of them is that every coach should be required to take heat illness recognition course. Right now, that's only required for football coaches. And so there are heat illness issues for every sport. And a lot of times it's during the summer, but almost every sport has some kind of team camp that they go to in the summer. So it's important. Additional training for cheer coaches or some other basic training for first and second year coaches to kind of get them on board with the philosophies of coaching. So education wise, safety wise, sport law wise, those are the basic ones that are submitted each year.
I want to say, I'm trying to figure out how to frame this question, and so it's one that is cogent. The discussion, or I should say, not only the discussion, but the just this proliferation of select sports. It used to be just AAU basketball. Then it was, I remember, when I was coaching in the late 90s, early aughts, there was conversation around soccer. You had AAU basketball, and basketball had become a 13-month out of the year sport. And soccer, you had to make a decision. You want to play with your club team or the team at your school, setting up this paradox like in the pros. You want to play for your club team or the international team. And a lot of people's club coaches, they weren't letting the kids come to practice late, and they had to be there, and it started a little bit of a controversy. Then you had, the girls basketball started to jump in. Then you started to have this select team baseball, and baseball has become almost like this cottage industry in itself. And kids are playing, and it feels like it's changed the tenor of high school athletics a little bit. Tell us.
There's no doubt about that. Multi-sport athletes used to be very common in every school. You might have a boy that played football, basketball, and baseball, or girls that played volleyball, basketball, and ran track. More and more kids are choosing to specialize. USA Volleyball is huge. Club volleyball is huge. And what happens as a result of that, the kids that choose to participate in just one sport then are not there to support their classmates in another sport during another season. So, and in most cases, what we hear, it's all driven by what they believe is going to generate for them a college scholarship. And that's not necessarily the case. There are only so many kids, there are only so many college spots that are available, but it's what those kids choose to do, and their parents wind up investing a lot of money in it.
It's hard for people to understand, isn't it, that only 1% of high school students ever get a college, this mythical college scholarship. And and I think that's one of the things that that the WIAA has tried to protect, is that this is high school athletics. You're not playing it to get a college scholarship. Right. You are working to establish yourself as a person in the community. You're learning values, and it's a part of the educational mission. It's co-curricular, and having said that, I think that should always be the mission of high school athletics. Do you agree? Or?
Oh, totally agree. It might be the only chance to compete that these kids ever get. So it's like, make the most of it, and involve in make as many friends as you can, work with different coaches, learn different things. It's a lot of valuable experiences in doing different things.
38 years later, what do you say to yourself? What do you, if you could talk to Cindy in 38 years ago, 1986, what would you say?
Always be willing to take on a challenge, and be willing to adjust and be flexible, and don't be afraid of technology. My coworkers will laugh about that one, I'll tell you.
Good lessons for all of us, and certainly one I can also share. She is Cindy Adsit. She has been with the WIAA, as she said, 38 years. She has impacted the lives of students throughout the state of Washington. We appreciate her coming down and spending time with us on your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.world. I believe Mick Hoffman said he will be back with us next week. We will see. We know he's a busy character. He's got a lot going on. and it's always fun to catch up with him. But he has sent several of his outstanding staff down here in the last couple of weeks to be with us. We do appreciate it. We will see you next week at WIAA Primetime on your community radio station, RainierAvenueRadio.world.